Time is a force that operates beyond human control, beyond emotions, beyond expectations. It moves forward relentlessly, indifferent to the desires of those who wish to speed it up or slow it down. When someone walks away from you, when they decide that your presence in their life is no longer needed, time immediately begins its work. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for them to realize their mistake. It simply starts unfolding the consequences of their decision. Whether they acknowledge it or not, time will eventually make them confront the reality they tried to escape from. At first, they may feel relief. They may believe they've made the right choice, convinced that they have the upper hand, that life without you will be just as fulfilling or even better. They might immerse themselves in distractions, in new experiences, in new people. They may even boast to themselves about their ability to move forward without hesitation. But what they don't realize in that moment is that time doesn't reveal its lessons immediately. It works gradually, silently, and with precision. The absence of a person doesn't always hit like a sudden shock. Often, it creeps in slowly, settling into the small, unnoticed moments of everyday life. At first, they don't feel much, perhaps a moment of curiosity about what you're doing, a passing thought of a memory shared. But as days turn into weeks and weeks into months, the silence starts to weigh on them. They reach for their phone out of habit, only to realize that your name is no longer in their notifications. The spaces where you once existed begin to feel emptier. The laughter that once filled conversations fades into routine exchanges with others who don't quite understand them the way you did. The realization comes in waves, often unexpected and uninvited. It could be a song playing in the background that brings back a memory they thought they had buried. It could be the way a stranger says something that reminds them of the way you used to speak. It could be the absence of a simple good morning or good night text that once felt insignificant, but now feels like a missing piece of their day. The comfort they took for granted, the presence they assumed would always be there, has now become a void they can't ignore. And time continues. It doesn't just remind them of what they had. It begins to make them question what they chose instead. Maybe they thought they were upgrading, that they would find someone better, that they would be happier without you. But time strips away illusions. It forces them to compare, to measure what they once had against what they have now. The excitement of something new fades, and they start noticing the differences. The depth of conversation, the level of understanding, the emotional connection they once had with you. These things don't come easily with just anyone. Time exposes what was real and what was temporary. Regret is not an immediate reaction. It builds over time. At first, they may convince themselves that they made the right choice. They may even attempt to justify it by finding faults in you, by telling themselves that they are better off. But time is patient, and it wears down even the strongest of convictions. The more they try to move on, the more they realize that certain things are not so easily replaced. Loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from realizing that no one else understands you the way someone from your past did. It comes from laughing at a joke but not feeling the warmth of shared understanding. It comes from achieving something but having no one to celebrate with in the way they used to. It comes from looking around a room full of people and still feeling a sense of emptiness. And then the questions begin. Did they make a mistake? Should they have tried harder? Should they have valued you more? These questions don't arrive suddenly. They grow slowly, shaped by time, shaped by the contrast between what they once had and what they have now. And by the time these thoughts fully take root, time has already done its work. The person they once knew, the person they once had easy access to, is no longer the same. Time doesn't just break them, it transforms you. As they sit with these thoughts, as they replay moments in their mind, as they wonder whether you ever think about them, time delivers its final lesson. Choices have consequences. The longer they go without you, the more they are forced to feel the weight of what they lost. And in that realization, time has completed its mission. Pain is an unavoidable part of the human experience. It arrives uninvited, often at the worst possible moment, and it lingers longer than we expect. When someone you trusted, someone you invested in, someone you gave your time, energy, and emotions to decides to walk away or betray you, the pain feels almost unbearable. It is a deep, piercing sensation that shakes the very foundation of your emotions. It clouds your mind, making even the simplest tasks feel exhausting. You may wake up with a heavy heart, replaying conversations, analyzing what went wrong, and feeling overwhelmed by a mixture of sadness, anger, and confusion. This is the moment where most people get stuck, where they allow pain to consume them rather than guide them. Pain, when misunderstood, becomes a prison. It locks you into a cycle of self-doubt, of questioning your worth, of believing that you were not good enough. It convinces you that you were the problem, that maybe if you had done something differently, things wouldn't have ended the way they did. This is where people begin to lose themselves, caught in an endless loop of regret and what ifs. They carry their pain like a burden, allowing it to weigh them down instead of using it as a tool for growth. But pain is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to awaken you. Pain is a signal. It is a message from within, telling you that something in your life requires change. It forces you to confront reality, to step out of the illusions you once held, and to see things as they truly are. The reason it feels so intense is because it is demanding your attention. When you resist pain, when you try to suppress it or ignore it, it only intensifies. But when you choose to listen, to understand what it is trying to teach you, it transforms from an enemy into a guide. Every painful experience carries a lesson. Maybe the lesson is that you tolerated disrespect for too long. Maybe the lesson is that you placed too much of your happiness in someone else's hands. Maybe the lesson is that you ignored red flags because you wanted to believe in potential rather than reality. Pain does not appear without reason. It arrives when something needs to be learned. And the longer you resist its message, the longer it will linger. Some people try to escape pain by seeking temporary relief, jumping into new relationships, numbing themselves with distractions, or burying themselves in work. But no external solution can heal an internal wound. You may surround yourself with new people, you may fill your days with constant activity, but the moment you are alone, the pain resurfaces. This is because pain cannot be outrun. It must be faced. The truth about pain is that it is an indicator of your strength. The fact that you feel deeply, that you are affected by loss, disappointment, or betrayal means that you are someone who truly invests in what you care about. It means you love deeply, that you gave genuinely, that you were authentic in your emotions. And while right now that may feel like a weakness, in time you will come to see it as one of your greatest strengths, because only those who feel deeply have the capacity to grow deeply. Pain is also a purifier. It strips away illusions, forcing you to see people for who they truly are. It removes the blinders of attachment, revealing the truth that was hidden beneath emotions. It teaches you to value yourself, to set boundaries, to recognize what you truly deserve. In the moment, it may feel like you have lost something valuable, but what you are actually losing is a version of yourself that settled for less. There will come a point when the pain that once felt unbearable begins to feel lighter. It won't happen all at once, but rather in small moments. One day you will wake up and realize that the thought of them no longer holds power over you. The conversations you replayed in your mind will no longer carry the same emotional weight. The memories that once felt like knives will begin to lose their sharpness. And that is when you will know that pain has done its work. It has reshaped you, refined you, and prepared you for something greater. But for that to happen, you must be willing to let pain guide you rather than control you. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is this trying to teach me? Instead of drowning in emotions, step back and observe them. Let yourself feel, but do not let yourself be consumed. Because pain is not the end, it is only the beginning of transformation. Silence is one of the most powerful tools you can use when someone has walked away from you. It is not just the absence of words, it is the presence of strength, control, and unshaken confidence. When someone chooses to remove themselves from your life, the natural instinct is to chase, to seek closure, to demand answers. The human mind craves explanation, and the heart resists uncertainty. But in reality, silence is the greatest response you can give. It speaks louder than any words ever could, and over time, it becomes impossible to ignore. In the beginning, they may not notice. They may assume you are struggling, sitting by your phone, waiting for their message, desperate for their return. This is what most people expect after they leave. They expect sadness, pleading, or some form of emotional reaction that reassures them of their importance. They want to feel that their absence has power, that they were significant enough to cause suffering. But when you remain silent, when you refuse to react, you disrupt their expectations. Your silence becomes a mystery, something they cannot quite understand. And what people cannot understand, they cannot ignore. At first, they may brush it off, believing that you will eventually reach out. They assume it's only a matter of time before you break the silence, before you cave in and remind them of the place they once held in your life. But as days turn into weeks and you still say nothing, they begin to feel something they never expected: doubt. They start to wonder if they miscalculated, if they were wrong about you, if perhaps they were the ones who lost something valuable. Silence is not just about refusing to speak, it is about refusing to give them access to your emotions. It is about detaching yourself from the situation and allowing them to sit with their own choices. When you remain silent, you remove yourself as their source of validation. They no longer have the reassurance that you are still thinking about them, still affected by them, and that is when they begin to feel the weight of their own actions. The mind is a funny thing. It fills in the gaps when it lacks information. When they do not hear from you, when they do not know what you are thinking or feeling, their mind starts creating scenarios. They begin to question whether you have moved on, whether you have found happiness elsewhere, whether they even mattered as much as they believed. And the longer your silence lasts, the more these thoughts grow. In the quiet, they start to reflect. Without your presence, without your energy feeding their ego, they are left alone with their own thoughts. And those thoughts become louder with each passing day. They replay past conversations, revisit shared moments, and wonder if they underestimated what they had. Regret does not always come immediately. Sometimes it builds over time, creeping in slowly until it is undeniable. Silence is a sign of self-respect. It is a declaration that you do not beg for attention, that you do not chase what does not want to be caught. It is proof that you value yourself enough to walk away from anyone who does not see your worth. And when someone realizes that they have no control over you, that they cannot manipulate your emotions, that their absence does not break you, it unsettles them. They begin to feel powerless. The longer you remain silent, the more they begin to crave a response. They may test the waters with small attempts to reconnect, a random message, a casual "how have you been?" But these are not because they care. These are because they need to know if they still have a hold on you. And when you do not engage, when you remain detached, they are forced to face the reality that they are no longer a priority in your life. Silence forces them to look inward. It forces them to confront their own emptiness, their own choices, their own consequences. While they may have believed that leaving you was an easy decision, time combined with silence makes them question everything. They start comparing their current reality to the past, measuring their happiness against what they once had. There is no greater revenge than indifference. When you show that their presence or absence makes no difference to your life, you take away their power. Silence is not about playing games. It is about positioning yourself above the situation, about proving to yourself that you are stronger than the emotions that try to control you. It is about mastering self-control, about recognizing that not everyone deserves a response, and that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to say absolutely nothing at all. Time has a way of revealing the truth in ways that words never could. In the beginning, he may feel free, unbothered, even relieved. He may believe that walking away was the best decision, that he has escaped responsibility, commitment, or the weight of your presence in his life. There is often a false sense of confidence that comes with leaving someone behind. It creates an illusion of control, a belief that he holds the power because he made the choice to leave. But time is a silent force, working beneath the surface, slowly unraveling everything he thought he knew. At first, he is distracted. He fills the void with excitement, new experiences, or the company of others who seem to make his departure feel justified. He convinces himself that life is better without you, that he made the right choice, that the grass is greener on the other side. And in those early days, he may not think of you much at all. This is where most people make the mistake of assuming that his indifference is permanent, that his lack of immediate regret means he will never feel the loss. But emotions do not always reveal themselves in the moment. Sometimes they take time to surface. Days turn into weeks, and at first he is still holding on to the illusion of control. He tells himself that if he wanted to, he could return at any moment, that if he changed his mind, you would still be there. He believes that you are waiting, that you are struggling without him, that his absence has left you desperate for his return. But as more time passes and he hears nothing from you, doubt begins to creep in. The silence that once felt like power now starts to feel like uncertainty. He starts to wonder if he made a mistake. If you had been reaching out, if you had been chasing after him, it would have reassured him of his importance. But when you remain silent, when you continue living your life as though his departure made no difference, it begins to affect him. He starts to question whether you were really as invested as he believed. He wonders if you have moved on, if you have found someone else, if you ever truly needed him at all. The longer he goes without you, the more these thoughts begin to consume him. It is in the quiet moments, the unexpected ones, where he begins to feel the weight of his decision. A familiar song plays, and suddenly a memory of you floods his mind. He sees something that reminds him of a joke you once shared, and for a brief moment he wishes he could send it to you. He passes by a place where you once stood together, and instead of feeling freedom, he feels something else, something he cannot quite explain. He realizes that his world is not as full as it once was. The truth about time is that it removes illusions. In the beginning, he may have convinced himself that you were replaceable, that he could find someone else who made him feel the same way. But as time stretches on, he begins to realize that what you had was not so easily found. He starts to compare every new interaction to what he once had with you, and none of them feel quite the same. He looks for pieces of you in other people, hoping to recreate the connection, the comfort, the familiarity, but it is never quite right. And then comes the regret, the realization that what he once had is gone, that his choices have led him to a place he never expected to be. He may try to fight it, to distract himself, to push the thoughts away, but they return stronger each time. Because time does not erase the truth. It only makes it clearer. He begins to understand that you are not just an option, but a presence in his life that added value. He remembers your kindness, your support, the way you understood him in ways others never could. He recalls the moments when you stood by him, when you believed in him, when you gave him parts of yourself that no one else had. And the more he remembers, the heavier the silence becomes. At some point, he will want to reach out. Maybe it is a simple message, a casual check-in, or an attempt to rekindle something he thought he could live without. But when he does, he will be faced with the harshest truth of all. You are no longer where he left you. You have grown beyond him. You have become someone who no longer waits, who no longer begs, who no longer looks back. And that realization, more than anything else, will be what breaks him. There is something deeply unsettling about realizing that someone you once thought would always be there is no longer waiting for you. It is a slow, creeping realization, one that does not hit all at once, but builds over time, growing stronger with each passing day. At first, he may not even notice. He believes that he has all the time in the world, that if he ever changes his mind, you will still be exactly where he left you. There is a dangerous comfort in assuming that people remain unchanged, that they will always feel the same way, that the door will always be open. But time has a way of shifting things, of revealing truths, of showing people the consequences of their actions in ways they never anticipated. At first, he convinces himself that nothing has changed. He moves forward, filling his days with distractions, with temporary excitement, with anything that keeps him from facing the silence you left behind. He assumes that you are thinking about him, missing him, maybe even waiting for the moment when he decides to come back. This belief gives him a false sense of security, a feeling of control over the situation. He believes that he still has power, that he can return whenever he pleases, that no matter how much time passes, he can always step back into your life like nothing ever happened. But then time stretches on. Days become weeks, weeks become months, and something begins to shift. The things that once distracted him no longer hold the same appeal. The excitement of walking away starts to fade, and in its place, a new thought begins to creep in. A thought that was once easy to ignore, but now refuses to be silenced. He starts to wonder about you, not just in passing, not just in fleeting moments of nostalgia, but in a way that lingers. In a way that makes him pause and question whether he truly understood what he was walking away from. At first, he pushes the thoughts away. He reminds himself of why he left, of the reasons he justified his decision. But the mind is a complicated thing. It has a way of softening memories, of filtering out the conflicts and leaving only the warmth behind. He does not remember the disagreements or the moments of frustration with the same intensity. Instead, he recalls the comfort of your presence, the sound of your laughter, the way you understood him in a way no one else did. He starts to feel the weight of something he did not expect, emptiness. And then the realization starts to take hold. He notices that you are not reaching out, that you are not chasing him, that you are not trying to pull him back into your world. He thought he would hear from you by now. He thought at the very least you would show some sign that you are still thinking about him, but you are silent. Not because you are playing a game, not because you are trying to manipulate him, but because you have truly moved on. And that realization, more than anything else, shakes him. The absence of your presence is no longer something he can ignore. It becomes obvious in ways he did not anticipate. He hears a song that reminds him of you, and instead of feeling fond nostalgia, he feels something closer to loss. He sees a place you once visited together, and instead of feeling relief that he is free, he feels the sting of what is missing. He watches someone else laugh in a way that reminds him of you, and for a brief moment, he catches himself wishing he could turn back time. But the most painful realization comes when he finally understands that you have outgrown him. That while he was assuming he had time, while he was believing you would always be there, you were becoming someone new, someone stronger, wiser, more self-assured, someone who no longer looks back, who no longer holds space for someone who did not appreciate them when they had the chance and when he reaches out. Because eventually he will find that the person he left behind no longer exists. It is in that moment, more than any other, that he will feel the full weight of his choices, because he will finally understand that the longer he went without you, the more he lost. And no amount of regret, no amount of realization can undo what time has already set in motion. Time is a force that no one can escape. It moves forward, whether we acknowledge it or not, shaping us in ways we never expect. In the beginning, he may have believed that his decision to walk away was final, that he had control over the situation, that he could leave you behind and never look back. He may have convinced himself that he was making the right choice, that life would be easier without you, that he was free. But what he did not account for was the way time would work against him, the way absence would make your presence even more powerful, the way silence would become louder than any words you could have spoken. At first, he feels nothing, or at least he tells himself he doesn't. He keeps himself busy, filling the empty spaces with distractions, with new people, with anything that keeps him from facing the quiet truth that lingers beneath the surface. He believes that because he made the choice to leave, he is the one in control. He assumes that if he ever changes his mind, you will still be waiting, still hoping, still holding on. He carries this belief with confidence, mistaking your silence for weakness, mistaking your absence for longing. But time moves differently when you are the one who walked away. In the beginning, it feels like an advantage. He is in motion, forward, unbothered. The days pass, and he barely notices. He may even feel relief, as if a weight has been lifted from his shoulders. But the thing about time is that it does not reveal its consequences immediately. It is patient, relentless, waiting until just the right moment to show its hand. At first, the realization comes in small moments, a familiar scent that triggers a memory, a phrase that reminds him of something you used to say, a sudden, unexpected wave of nostalgia that he quickly pushes away. He does not want to admit it, not yet. He convinces himself that these thoughts mean nothing, that they are simply echoes of the past, fading remnants of something he has long since moved beyond. But then the silence starts to feel different. The absence he once welcomed begins to press down on him. He starts to notice that something is missing, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet moments. When he is alone with his thoughts, when there is no one left to distract him, when the weight of his choices begins to settle in, he starts to wonder what you are doing, if you are thinking about him, if you miss him the way you assume you would. But the longer he waits, the more he starts to realize that you are not waiting at all. It is not just the silence that gets to him, it is the absence of proof that you still care. He thought he would see hints of longing, small signs that you are still emotionally tied to him, maybe a late-night message, a slip in your resolve, an indirect post that suggests you are still thinking about him. But none of that comes. Instead, he sees you moving forward, living, growing, becoming someone new. And that is when the fear starts to creep in. At first, he tries to ignore it. He tells himself that he can still reach out whenever he wants, that if he really wanted to, he could fix things. But the more time passes, the more he begins to doubt that belief. He wonders if he has waited too long, if the door he assumed would always be open has already been closed. And that thought unsettles him in ways he never expected. Time is ruthless in the way it reveals the truth. The more distance there is between who you were and who you have become, the more he realizes what he lost. He starts to see you in a different light, not as someone he left behind, but as someone he can no longer reach. He begins to understand that his decision was not just about walking away in that moment, but about setting events into motion that he can no longer control. And then it happens. He sees you again, not physically maybe, but in a way that is undeniable. Perhaps it is a glimpse of your new life, a version of you that is happier, more confident, more fulfilled. Perhaps it is the realization that you no longer need him, that his absence did not break you but made you stronger. And in that moment, he understands the depth of his mistake, because he thought time would work in his favor, but instead it became his greatest enemy. The longer he went without you, the more it hurt, not just because he missed you, but because he finally realized that he could never get back what he had lost.